You really need to stay focused. It's fun. Growth is the fun side of the business, right? Is the way I classify it. But this long-lasting business that you want to be profitable, you really got to have a good balance and a good understanding of how you bring value to those customers and your ability to hang on to those customers.
Hi, I'm Paul Giannamore. I wanted to welcome our new subscribers to the channel. You know, historically, Potomac TV has been focused on business and operational information and interviews for residential and commercial services business owners. But after the publication of the Sell-Side M&A Masterclass last month, my LinkedIn inbox has been inundated with a variety of different requests. So Dylan and I will be sitting down filming more extensive M&A masterclasses, both focusing on the sell side as well as the buy side. I intend to talk about the choice of process, delving deep into M&A psychology, as well as extensive buy side practice, approach, and due diligence. For those of you who have not subscribed, you can click below and subscribe to the channel. Furthermore, we've provided a link here in the description where you can get on our email distribution list. And if you do that, you'll receive an email right in your inbox with our latest publications. Feel free to put a comment below on the types of things you want to see. I mean, this channel is largely driven by you, the viewer, and what you want to see from us. Again, thanks for joining us here at Potomac TV. Mitch, it's great to have you back.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
When was the first interview? Was it 21 maybe?
It was either 20 or 21.
Got it. So you've come a long way still. Now you're president, COO of Saela after a long career at True Greens and Rollins, right?
Correct. Yep.
And, you know, today one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about is, you know, you'd been the division president for the Pacific division of Rollins, or Orkin, for many years, and you were probably the most acquisitive, at least during that time period. You were the most acquisitive DP, I think, for Orkin. You've just done a ton of deals. My question for you is, you know, when you start to think about guys that are building their businesses right now, what have you learned by doing all those acquisitions, and some learnings that you would have for folks as far as how to do it right and how to do it wrong?
I think it's a great question. And having done a few deals over the years, I would start with how important it is to build your foundation the right way. I mean, looking at the hundreds of deals I've looked at over the years, and you know, certainly more that didn't meet the specs, right, that you're looking for than that did, but I couldn't overemphasize the value that comes from foundationally focusing on the service delivery, right? It's one thing to bring a new customer in. It's another thing to hold on to them. But as a buyer sitting in that seat, for me, it always started with how satisfied those customers were and how much value were you delivering to those customers. So the simple answer is you really need to stay focused. It's fun. Growth is the fun side of the business, right? Is the way I classify it. But this long-lasting business that you want to be profitable, you really got to have a good balance and a good understanding of how you bring value to those customers and your ability to hang on to those customers.
Let's break that down then. I think it's a very, very important thing you're saying. So how do you measure and manage that when you're thinking about the service delivery?
Okay.
You know, what are some things that you should focus on to really build that foundation? Let's say, I'll give you an example. You know, I run $1 million a year pest control business. I've got maybe 9 technicians. I'm trying to get customers in the door, right? I'm trying to spend a lot of money on marketing and advertising. And, you know, as you know, that the growth is the fun stuff, but like at the end of the day, I got to pay my bills.
Sure.
How do I balance all of that? And what is it about focusing on service delivery? How do I do that?
Good question. And I think the answer's multifaceted, but the reality is understanding maybe the better way to say it is understanding what drives value, right? Because it's super easy to when somebody calls you and they've got, you know, mice in the pantry or ants, you know, wherever, that's easy, right? We go out there, we kill the ants, or we get rid of the mice, but that's value, right? You just paid for that in the first service or the second service. But now what are you going to do for the next how many years to make sure that customer, the service that you deliver is equal to or greater than in value than the check they have to write? So how do you do that? Is the follow-up?
Yeah.
And you cut me off anytime, because
No, I want to hear this.
I'm a little overly passionate about this stuff. So I say it starts with making sure that when you bring the customer on, and whoever's selling that customer on the value of doing business with company A that we're talking about, or B, is the service you're going to deliver in the initial service, is it the same service that got sold? And I think that sounds really easy, but we're talking about companies that you look at and try to determine whether that company meets your ticket or not. Making sure you're on the same page, I would say, is absolutely where it starts. And I don't know that everybody really gets that. And I don't mean that in any way.
No, that's an interesting question. So give me an example of where that breakdown might occur,
Okay.
where the customer is being sold, where there's a disconnect between what the customer believes they're buying versus what they're actually being sold.
Okay. So, and maybe, one way to answer that question or approach is that I feel strongly that your service leadership and sales leadership should be wildly connected, right? If somebody's going to do service training in my sales room, I want to make sure that they're a service expert, and not only an expert in killing bugs, but an expert in what our service team is going to deliver to that customer. And that's where I would draw the boundaries around what the picture I'm trying to paint in teaching a sales team how to set a customer up for success, and simply meaning that what you're going to tell them is exactly what you're going to experience when that service specialist shows up at your door. So that might cover, how long do we spend on what's the minimum expectation that I'm going to be at your house? That's also a key value driver, right? When a customer gets a service, I mean, two big value points for them are what did you deliver, and how do you help me understand that? And if the decision maker isn't home, how do I communicate what just happened so that you see the value as the decision maker in your home or business?
Okay.
Right? So you got to be able to flip that bill with value comes from, or where does that value come from? Part of that value comes in how much time I spend, because it's time and money. And then the other part comes in the relay of what did I just do for you? When we just talked about it, I can get rid of your mice in your pantry if I'm good and lucky. I might do that in the first service. I might find their entry point. I might seal it up. I might treat that properly, get the mice out of there. But I come back in 60 or 90 days, whatever your frequency is. Now that's where we make the money, right? That's what it's all about. And now we're talking about foundationally, where I started with, what is your service foundation? What do you really do? Do I go places that a customer doesn't want to go? I mean, how much time do you spend in your attic if you've got an attic? How many times do you get underneath your house if you live in a home with a crawl space? They don't go there. Do we go there? If they don't, and we do, that's a great opportunity to deliver value to them. But you do that. Now, how do I get you to understand it if you're working and your partner is at home, doesn't really care about pest control, they're just home, right? Now I got to figure out, how do I get that to the decision maker at home? And that comes through good transfer of what I did. How do I tell that story and put it in a place where they can unpack it when they get home?
But in, I guess, that miscommunication of value, or not necessarily delivering what the customer expects you to deliver, how does that negatively impact the business, or how have you seen it negatively impact these businesses?
If we don't do that,
Yeah.
Obviously, the ultimate report card, at least in my simplified mind or the way I look at it, is what's your retention look like? And that looks different, right? In a lot of businesses, we calculate it differently. So that's a tough one to put your finger on. But when you get into a customer base, if I'm that $1 million business, I'm trying to grow my business, someday I might want to exit, and we're talking about the value that this value proposition that comes with the service delivery. I I really just want you to sell it, service it the same way, communicate it, and if you can't communicate it, I know that's what you're digging into. If you don't communicate it, Paul, the mice are gone. I'm paying you, let's just say $100 every time you come out here. Where's the value coming from? If I don't see it, if you can't communicate it with me, whether that's digitally, whether it's a piece of paper, but if you can't get it in front of me, where is the value? Why am I writing you that $100 check or having you withdraw that from my credit card or my bank account every 60 days or 90 days? So you will wildly see that in your retention rate. If you do it right, retention is higher. If you don't do it right and you haven't found a way to deliver that message, you will absolutely see it because customers won't see the value and they'll stop paying you.
Speaking of retention, when you were running the Pacific division for Orkin, were you more focused on new customer acquisition or were you more focused on retaining your current customers? I'm sure there's a balance between the two, but I'm just curious of where you spent your time thinking.
Both aspects super important and very much under the microscope. But everything comes back to service and customer satisfaction. In fact, I don't think you should be selling if you're not servicing properly. I think that's a waste of money. So I would put it this way: both important, but it starts with service and customer satisfaction, customer retention, before it goes to sales, because you do want to make money on that sale that you make.
So you saying that young growing companies would oftentimes have time better spent focused on understanding their retention rates, how they're retaining the customer, how they're servicing the customer, and how they can keep those customers rather than. I bring this up just because everyone's always focused on the next customer, right? Customer acquisition costs. How do you market? How do you sell? Everyone walking around here is always asking questions about the greatest advertising thing that you can do.
Sure.
I don't hear nearly as much conversation about how do I keep the customers that I have?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question because you see it all. You see it all over the board when you're dealing with transactions, right, of companies exiting the space and buyers who want to acquire more customers. I'm just thinking about all the experiences of meeting with buyers, and it's fascinating. And maybe I take this in a different direction, but I don't know how you get to sales without making sure we're locked down on the servicing side. And maybe I'm not getting where you're trying to go, but it's hard for me, Paul, to think about spending the dollar to acquire you, and then the threat of you leaving me in the next little bit, whether that little bit is 1 year, 30 days, or 3 years. Great service delivery means you're going to be here for a long time.
Well, that's the reason why I asked you this question, because ever since I've known you for the last decade plus, you've always been focused on retention rates.
Yeah.
Most people aren't. I mean, you ask most people in here, they can't even tell you what their customer retention rates are.
Sure.
You were constantly looking at monthly churn rates and where are we going?
That's right.
And so I think for someone like you, it's hard to believe. But I think for a lot of folks, they're always focused on how do I grow the top line? How do I get that next new customer, and not so much how I retain customer. And I brought this up because you talked about the service delivery and building the fundamentals. If we kind of build onto the fundamentals, you've got service delivery. What are some other important key attributes for these younger guys growing these businesses that they should be focused on?
On the service side?
Well, not necessarily on the service side. So we've got the service delivery as a cornerstone, fundamental. Okay. What are some other things that pop into your mind?
So it seems pretty simple in my mind, but there's multiple aspects of that service delivery, right? You sell it, you service it, you got to collect it, right? And that's what we hope to do. We hope to only service it one time, right? Not have to come back for more. But if you think about how do you do that, right? We talked about it starts with making sure it was sold right and properly set up. Cancellation rates are just one metric that are important right there. It's kind of the ultimate scorecard, I think.
Right.
But now I'm going to start looking at reservice rates, right? And do I have the right recipe in each of the service applications that are being done outside your home, inside your home? And so we can look at those we can look at those reservice rates and say, wait a minute, you're looking at a cancel here if you can't get these reservices under control. And reservices, it might be a time problem that I'm not spending enough time on an account. It might be the service that I'm providing, or might be somebody that's just not dedicated to our service, or we haven't spent the time getting them trained properly. I can look at NPS rates, and reviews, and maybe be a little more pointed if I'm missing the boat here on what you're looking for. But that's all part of the package. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. I mean, do you ever compare reservice rates by technician across the board?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that. And what are some other key metrics that you tend to look at that inform you as to how service delivery is going?
So probably the key drivers in there, reservice rates for sure. And if you can compare those by route, by specialist, and now you're really getting into the weeds and figuring out where the root causes are, right? And in some of your problems, I mentioned the NPS scores that we look at, right? That customer feedback, that's another great vehicle. We know that if your NPS scores are dropping, that we're going to see reservice rates are going to be escalating. You're going to see cancellations, right, starting to appear. That's going to happen 60, 90, 120 days. You're going to see that in a pretty short amount of time.
How often would you typically do an NPS survey per customer?
Well, I think that your surveys could come out all the time, like every service, right?
Okay.
But maybe, if you're servicing the same customer for mosquito and termite and residential, you may want to say, okay, I only want to get a survey, every 60 days or no sooner than that. But I also don't think there's a problem every time you get a service for doing a survey. And there's a difference between surveys and reviews, right? I don't know you want to ask for somebody, and some of those platforms don't allow you to continually do that. But as far as asking for surveys, I think that's wherever you want it to be. And I don't think there's a problem with frequency being really close.
Okay.
You definitely want to pay attention to that, because that's a wildly good indicator that I have a problem, or we get it and we're delivering in exactly the way we want to deliver. So service, am I on time, on schedule, right? Looking at how good, if there's a 2-hour window or a 1 or 3 or whatever you're doing in your company, let's make sure that we deliver and don't frustrate people by sitting home all day waiting for the guy or gal that was supposed to be here 3 hours ago. So am I on time, on schedule? Do I keep my customers in the month? If you're happy and I'm delivering value and you're scheduled for service every 60 days or 90 days, you're going to take the service on a regular basis. If you're not happy, you're going to keep pushing me back. So I'm going to look at those service completion rates. Those need to be front and center. No doubt cancellations are the leading indicator of how good or not good you are, but NPS scores, am I on time, on schedule? That's telling me proactively if I'm going to have a problem. But service completions, if I've got 100 customers or 200 or 300 in that route at the start of that month, how many of them did I get done? And then did I get them done on time, on schedule, right? And then do I have to go back and do it again? You think about how connected those are, and you were drawing putting together this process map. They all have a piece in there that you should really pay attention to.
So I would imagine historically for you, both in your current position as well as what you've done historically, you spent a lot of time on the roads. You would go out to branches.
Yeah.
So irrespective of what company this is, I would imagine you ran into branches that experienced some of these problems more so than others.
Sure.
So what sort of conversations would you have with people?
So that's a great question. And this is the people business, right? So everybody's different. And I could get wildly distracted on that topic, because I think it's important that you understand how your leadership, how they are best communicated with, and they understand how you like to be communicated with. So I think that comes on the front end of establishing relationships and getting people comfortable with communicating with each other. But that's a very complex question, if you will. I think that we should be kind and respectful, right? We treat people like we want to be treated, but if we really want them to be successful, we have to be very deliberate. And when you and I've known each other for a lot of years, worked a lot together on a lot of deals, if something doesn't go right, I don't know that there's value in getting overly hyped up about it, right? It's got to be urgent. Same thing with this branch manager that we're talking to, and if there's a service manager there. But I also want you to listen, feel respected, and feel like, okay, this is my growth opportunity. So I come in there and hit you with a hammer, you may not even know what's going on. Right. I don't see any value in that. I believe we should be educational, very exact in the delivery of where expectations are, so that you know what a job well done looks like. And then that's going to also tell me if those that are responsible for that branch manager and their success and that branch hitting its targets, that's going to tell me what's going on. It's going to give me an indicator anyway. Are we doing a good job supporting you as management in the field, or are we not? And so I'm always going to have whoever that leader is with me when I'm going to go visit those branches.
So you go out to a branch, let's say that cancellation rates have ticked up. When you would go out historically, are you going out there to somewhat do a diagnostic to basically figure out what's going on? Or do you pretty much do you oftentimes have a sense for what's going on before you even show up?
Yeah, well, I think you see both, right? Sometimes things do look good for reasons, but there is always opportunity for improvement, right? And if I've got 6 service specialists in that office, like we're talking about, this $1 million organization, how many specialists that you need for that? Or if I've got 36 specialists, this is a large operation. It's all relative, right, to that. So maybe dig a little deeper in that question with me.
Yeah, I guess let's do a little role playing.
Okay.
I'm a branch manager. My cancellation rates have doubled over the last 6 months.
Yep.
I don't seem to understand what's going on. So I'm curious of how somebody like you would come out and deal with me and help diagnose this, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, is that typical of what you would run into? I mean, or is that an outlier scenario? I mean,
No,
your branch managers often know what was going on, or did you look at numbers and say, hey, man, this isn't looking good. I need to head out to Tulsa or whatever and sit down with Paul?
Sure. Well, let me start by saying good high-performing branches and low-performing branches all need attention, right? Some are just more urgent than others, right? Your branches should be looking at the same field metrics that I'm looking at, and they should know if there's a problem, and between their leader and that branch manager, they generally know that there's a problem and should be well prepared to talk about that. But my visit is always, if there's a problem in the branch, I'm always going to address that while I'm there appropriately with their leader. But I also think that it's wildly important that we as senior leaders are out in the field, where the field represents, I mean, they are our brand, right? That service specialist. So yes, I'm gonna deal in this situation with your high cancellation rate. I want to peel back the layers and see what's going on. Is it a handful of routes that's causing it? Do you have a systemic problem across your whole business based on the fact that we're seeing it across all routes? And from there, then we're going to go into where's that problem coming from, right? Let's just say it's a handful of specialists. Now I want to look at NPS scores. I want to see, does it start with, are you on time, on schedule? So we're just going to start peeling back the layers on wherever we find the problem. But I rarely will go to a branch and not go in the field with the branch manager, the regional, the service manager, and go spend some time with some of those service specialists. I think it's wildly important.
And so tell me, what does that mean when you go out in the field and you're with service specialists? What are you doing?
Well, there's 2 pieces to that. And I think it's really important because the goal really should be, I want to give you a job well done. I want you to know that. I know when I was a service specialist, if my boss said, Mitch, great job, what that meant to me. I want you to feel the same way. So let's start by just knowing that my goal is to give you a job well done, Paul. So, but I'm going to start by looking at the homes, a few houses or businesses that you treated in the last 3 days, and I'm probably going to pick those, right? So that we're not, no one's setting me up for success. Not that anybody would do that, but so I want to go look at recently what you just did. Are there still webs, right, in the eaves or on the window seals? Is there, organic debris down in your window wells, or you got wood stacked up against your house? And if you do, we got trees hanging on it, right? And it's a highway for rodents to get up on there and other insects, right? I want to see how you're dealing with our customer that we spend a lot of money on. So we started this conversation today, right? So I think it's important that you go back and look at what's been done. That allows us to be able to see, is there something that we need to stress with you to help elevate in your day-to-day treatment of our customers? And the best case scenario is finding no webs, because it's natural for people to stack stuff against the house. We're talking about organic matter or spare building material or a wood pile or whatever. But have we told them that this is really could lead to a rodent problem in your home or an ant problem or whatever it is? I'd love to be able to come up. Now I'm going to go see you. I've just visited 3 of your homes, in this case residential. I would love to come up and say, look, Paul, I've just visited 3 of your customers, and you're really doing a great job. Job well done. Now let's go do your service. I want to see how you deliver it to make sure that you're checking all the boxes in what you're doing today. It also allows me another opportunity, right, to put my arm around you and say, hey, thank you for doing what's so important to our company, and that's delivering value so that we can hang on to these customers. That also provides opportunity for you, because I want to grow another route. I want to put on another service manager someday. I'd like to open up another office, and I can't do that if I'm not in touch with you and your service delivery and how that's aligned with how we're trying to onboard new customers.
Did you ever show up at any of the homes and talk to the customers?
Say that again.
Did you ever show up at the home and talk to the customer?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So on those particular field visits, you would actually talk to customers?
I believe we should always go to the door, make sure, and not everybody answers the door.
Yep.
But we do want them to know that their pest control provider is on site. And it's just amazing when a customer who's been with you for a long time, it's a great opportunity to express gratitude for them being with us so long, and even asking them questions, which is fun for me, about what do they think we do really well, and what do they think we really need to work on to bring more value to them. And they're both good questions.
Do you still do that today? Go out and talk to customers?
I do. I wish in having responsibility for the day-to-day operations of our company, I wish I had more time to do that, but I won't go to the field. I do go to the field, absolutely. That is where my heart is.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be in the field without going to a branch and without getting out and seeing our service specialists and doing just exactly what I said. I don't know how you run a company and stay in touch with what's really happening so that you can make good decisions in looking forward and what you need to do to keep your company on track, to grow your company and reach the goals that you have. I just don't know how else you do it. And look, I've been doing this a long time. What fascinates me about our industry is what you see here in Pest World. This is my favorite place because of innovation and opportunity, and the opportunity that innovation provides for us in continuous improvement to get better. So, but communicating with customers, being out in the field, when I get the chance to travel, I'm just not going to travel unless I have the opportunity to do that. That's my choice.
When you look at acquisition opportunities, over the years, you've done countless. What are some of the things that excite you at a potential opportunity? And what are some things that you've looked at maybe historically and instantly said, no, this isn't for me?
So what excites you and
What repulses you?
right? Let's start with the fun stuff, which is what excites me. I mean, we are in the people business, like we mentioned earlier, so it's all about leadership. Being able to have the opportunity to sit at the table at an acquisition with somebody who leads well, especially if they're staying, but if they're not, have they led well? Which becomes very obvious, right? Metrics tell you a big big part of that story, and then that personal connection sitting across the table from each other. That's where it starts with me. The metrics, if they're sexy and they look great, and I want to get to know you as the leader, the founder, who's responsible for that. So that's the fun side. The attraction, right, starts there, or it ends there, right? When you're looking at the metrics. But getting into the people side of it is super cool. And it tells you a lot about what I can do with this business, or what do I have to do to get this business in a place where I can try to take it to the next level, whatever that next level is.
Do you remember there was one deal, maybe it was like 10 years ago, you called me up on the closing day and everything was fine, but you did make the comment, you said, Paul, I really don't like how the branch manager is dressed.
I do. I think I know exactly what you're talking about.
So you do pay attention to that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
I mean, you really are focused on the people. So you made a comment about how you didn't like the branch manager was dressed back in those days. What about that? What about how those people dressed? I get that seemed to irritate you.
Well, let me tell you what drives that is I want what we do to be super important to you, and I want you to be proud of it. I'm super proud of what I've been doing the last 39 years. And I may be behind the times in my dress, but you can't argue that I'm not passionate about what I do. I really want that manager to be passionate and proud of what they do. And part of that is I want them to look the part. They show up in front of a customer and they knock on the door like I believe we should be doing. I want them to look professional and come and start that way when the customer opens the door. Want to put them at ease, and I think there's a lot to be said with that. I think it expresses how you feel about the business.
100% agree with you. Yeah.
So
I wasn't surprised when you made that comment.
Well, yeah, it is what it is, and so that is there is a bar there, and I do think there's an absolute connection between that, and we all see our brand a certain way, but sitting in the corporate office, that's not our brand, right? What we're talking about is how people, that's where they get their perception of us. These good folks, are they not good folks? Are they easy to do business with? Are they not? That's why I think it's important that we look appropriate on the doors and what we deliver service.
So you were talking about people. So when you're looking at acquisition targets, I mean, how important is the chemistry between you and like the owner of the company, or how that person presents him or herself?
I think it makes, it depends how that impacts, or has or hasn't impacted the business. If you don't see eye to eye with me, I just think that's people, right? Because we're all different. It's part of the beauty of life, especially in our industry. So I would love it if we saw eye to eye every time we're looking at a potential seller and bringing that business on board, but it's not always the case. So and it's not certainly not the most important factor. If somebody is exiting, if they're staying, it's pretty important that we get along. It's not mandatory, but yeah, there's value in that, and I think that obviously the better the communication in our relationship, the better chance we have of being successful. And if you think about it, when I was talking about you understanding how I like to be communicated and vice versa, and I would say it's wildly more important for me if I'm the leader to understand how you like to be communicated with, and that comes through you can do personality tests for that, or you can just spend some time with that person, right, and getting to know them and trying to really focus on how they like that communication. I think that's just vital. But to answer your question, if you're staying, we need to be in alignment as a company and as leadership, I think, to make that as successful as possible. But it doesn't really matter if we can communicate well and be respectful of each other and treat people like human beings. But does that make sense?
It makes sense, and maybe chemistry wasn't the right question. I guess the path I want to go down on is how important you think the founder is. That somebody who founds a business, who's operating the business, in actually setting the culture of the organization, and can you pick up cues based on how that individual is as to what you might find below the surface in the actual business?
I think so, and that's probably telling of how much conversation and what kind of questions are you asking that person and getting to know them as an owner. But I think you could definitely connect. You could connect, I believe, talking to our management team in the field. If I'm doing my job, conceptually, you should be hearing the same things that you're hearing from me, and maybe in the same tone even. If you can grasp that. I'm probably doing a poor job of describing that.
I can grasp that.
But I think you'll see those similarities. And so same thing, if I'm looking at a potential seller and trying to get to know them, it becomes easier when now you're looking underneath the hood of that business, and you've graduated onto that next phase, maybe in this due diligence process. You'll start to see the connection between, that makes sense based on my understanding and our relationship. I know that's kind of a gray area, but it's just interesting.
You spent what, 13 years at Rollins?
17 to be exact.
17 years at Rollins. Okay, I didn't think you were that old. What were some of the? I mean, obviously, it's a phenomenal organization,
For sure.
What are some of the most important things you learned there?
Well, when I started with Rollins was 1989, and they acquired the company. I was a new branch manager. I've been doing that for about a year, and let me tell you this. I used to get a profit and loss statement every month from that company. I would open that big vanilla envelope, and I'd look at the top, which was the revenue. How does that compare to the budget? The expenses were super complicated. Then I go to so I just go from the top of that to the bottom of that and look, did I make the money that the company expected me to make the money that month? That was how educated I was in P&L management. When Rollins acquired us in 1989, I got a master's in P&L management. And so if I think about takeaways and from Rollins, I really look at them as the gold standard in our industry. They've been around a long time, amazing brand, well led. I really learned how to read a profit and loss statement, and and if you do that right, in that education system that exists in that company, you can pretty much understand what's going on in those branch offices that we're talking about. If my material and supplies are too high, there's only a handful of reasons why that could exist. Somebody that understands that and teaching you that, wow, that mentorship is amazing. We're talking about, we started talking about sales and connecting those with service and the return on investment. Am I in line? Am I out of line? If you don't understand the profit and loss statement and into a depth that you can visualize what's going on in the field by reading this document, whether it's a fleet issue or a material and supply issue, or maybe it's in labor, that's invaluable. You could spend a whole day talking about interpreting that. So you asked me for maybe some takeaways from there. It started for me with understanding a profit and loss statement in great detail. And look, I don't think it's a secret. Well, spend a lot of time around that profit and loss statement, but then you connect that to the level of service that's being provided, because it certainly is. Reservices are going to cause you to use more product. Cancellations, right? They have an impact. If you're not routing properly, and showing up on time on schedule because you're not doing that, you're going to see that in fleet costs, and eventually it's in maintenance and it's in repairs and it's replacing vehicles prematurely. That's probably, if I think about all the levers that get pulled in running a pest control company, and not just a branch, but running something internationally, I don't even know how you start without an exact understanding of that statement. You're talking about going out and visiting branches. You darn sure shouldn't do that. We're obviously going to look at metrics, but financial performance compared to how we wanted that office to perform, that also tells you a whole nother narrative. So when you ask this question, that comes top of mind to me because they were masters in teaching me how to connect that profit and loss statement to what's going on in the field and how is our brand being represented.
You've never really gotten that sort of training, but you were at True Green prior, right?
True Green in between the two stints with Rollins, yes. Okay. And look, they at the time that they were all part of the Service Master brand, right? And yeah, they were very focused as well on a profit and loss statement. So I think I see that in common, specifically with Rollins. That's where the education started with me. It started from there, and tying that to service delivery and sales performance and the care of your vehicles and your buildings, and it tells a story.
If you've got a branch manager, I mean, how much knowledge of a P&L should an actual branch manager? He's got 20 technicians. What should that branch manager know? I mean, how in depth should a branch manager understand a P&L?
I would expect you to know it inside and out. I want you to
So basically, my revenue, my direct costs of service, my labor, my material, everything.
Yep.
Insurance, all the way down the line.
What's going on with insurance and liability? Yep. Every facet of that, you should be reviewing that every month in detail. And if there's a variance could be, I could be underspending, I could be outrunning my revenue, I could be overspending, I could be underperforming in my revenue. You need to understand that as a branch manager because you're responsible for performing and meeting those goals. So you should know that better than I do. If I understand the P&L, I already know pretty much what's going on in your branch. I obviously want you to know that better than I do, and I want you to be able to answer the detailed questions around why are fuel prices higher than they should be, right? Or material and supply costs, or labor. Where's that coming from? You absolutely need to understand that. We need to jump on it when your accounting is closed for the month, right? We need to jump on it, understand it, so we have more opportunity this month to right size wherever that problem is. So that may be a long answer to that simple question, but it's a big question.
No, it answers a question because that question comes up all the time. How much should branch managers really know about the P&L?
And if you're not sharing a P&L that is in detail, right? A summary of that P&L and then all the detail, right? And the general ledgers, anything that you have that supports that, right? Your fuel card transactions, they need to be able to see all of that and connect. Geez, right? We talk about fleet or M&S or payroll, right? But the story is in layers below that. I need to be able to get to the detail. And if you're spending too much in service labor, is that an overtime issue? Is it, is something going on that shouldn't be going on? Like, what's causing it? And so same thing with fleet. Is it coming from fuel? Is it coming from tires? Is it, and then what's connected to that? Well, route optimization is connected to that, right? And so, and our disciplines in route optimization, it's almost endless. Short answer is, I want you to know your P&L. Yeah. I don't want to, I really, and if I have to teach you, it's shame on me because I'm not doing my job. My job is to present you with the tools to be successful, and then to support you, and not just support you, but learn from you.
So are there, from a P&L management perspective, like Rollins, for example, then they would put managers through training programs to understand all that before you become a branch manager.
That's right.
Go.
And I mean, and it makes total sense, right? We're trying to set you up for success. And you mentioned Rollins, they do an amazing job of that. I did my first MDS, Manager Development School, back in 1989 with those folks, and it left a mark on me, you know, ever since then, right? Of how important that is.
Listen, Mitch, I know this was a short session today, but I appreciate you popping back in here.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Cheers.